Right, good afternoon, councillors. Welcome along to this meeting of the Community Wellbeing Committee, and welcome to those who are joining us on the live stream. We have one apology this afternoon, and that's from Councillor Bond. Would somebody like to move? That's accepted.
I'll move, Chair. I'll move.
Tom and Grant, put that all in favour.
Aye.
Against, carried. No items of public forum, so that moves us into the agenda. First item is to receive the minutes of the committee meeting on April 18th.
Move those, Mr Chair.
Councillor Soper, seconded Pania. Put that. Oh, sorry. Any matters arising from that? No. If not, I'll put that all in favour.
Aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. We've got the minutes of the District Licensing Committee April meetings and appointments, which I'll move if there's a seconder.
Second that.
Councillor Soper, put that.
Just a comment, Mr Chair. 2.1 and 2.2, they both say on licence. Should one be off licence? Or
Yes, one is the off licence. Quite right. Take your pick as to which is which. One is an on and one is an off. We'll amend item 2.2 to an off licence. Thank you for that. Any other matters? If not, I'll put that then. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. That brings us to the libraries strategy. Richard, welcome along. Kia ora koutou. If you take councillors through the paper, thanks.
Right, I'll take the report as read, but just two things I'd like to do is a bit of framing as to why we've created the strategy, and also just a note on the implementation. The reason we're doing this is to future-proof the library and to prepare ourselves for changes. So libraries have always been a vestibule of information and access to information. And we realise that as we move forward, it will become much more of a social service and a digital service to actually interpret information and become more about literacy, whether that's visual, text-based, interpretive research, all of those sorts of aspects. This strategy allows us to progress into the future and prepare for that sort of a service. The other note is just on the implementation. It says we'll be co-designing the implementation with staff, and that is to ensure that we retain some sort of authenticity with those who are working with the public day to day, and we want to co-design with the staff primarily, but also with the community to ensure that we're well placed. There's a bit of a strange resolution in there to say that we can change the format, and that is you'll see later on under implementation, that just talks about changing the cover. We've got a public program that we are wanting to do to take photos of members of the public using the library and actually have that as our cover page, and we want to reflect all of the communities of Invercargill, both in the document but also around the building itself. So that is why that little clause is in there.
So it's really just about the formatting of the document, not the content?
Absolutely, not the content or intent, but the ability to make it look and feel and reflect our community of Invercargill.
Richard, can I ask what sort of time frame do you think it's going to take to embed the strategy?
Well, we want to end up at a point of continual innovation and continual improvement. So the answer is both within the next 3 years, but also forever changing, forever evolving. So there are some things that we are ready to move on right away, and that includes the look and feel of the library, the skill sets and training staff to be able to respond to the sorts of inquiries. But working with the community and partners would be the first thing that we'll see an immediate change with. The rest of them are scheduled over a 3-year period. We are intending to implement the strategy within the envelope of both FTE and finance, so it's not a request for great investment.
It seems to reflect the change from when the library was, a book repository, but not in a Dallas, Texas type of way, to more of the community hub that it's become as Te Hāta, with all of the different activities that are going on in there. It's no longer just books in, books out, but events, community interaction and the like as well.
Absolutely. To that point, we used to go to a library to find information, and once we were in that library, we knew that information was 99% correct. It was a simpler time. Now there's no shortage of information. What we lack is the ability to interpret and use critical thinking to understand which information is real, what needs a critical lens on it, and where to find it and how to research. And that's much more a process of education and literacy that libraries are moving into. Also, we acknowledge that people come to the library not only for that learning and literacy aspect, but as social connection. It might be the only stable, warm place that some of our community visit on a day-to-day basis. So we are providing as much a social connection as anything else. And with an aging population and loneliness being a pinnacle of one of the problems that we will face in the future for elder communities, libraries play a really vital role.
So just one question of follow-up to that. When you talk about authentication, does that mean staff essentially going through and fact-checking, bearing in mind the reasonable degree of misinformation that exists globally?
We are not and never should be the information police, but what we should do is show people how they can interpret, what tools they can use for critical thinking, and whether that be training online or how to research. Those are the programs that start at a very young age that we need to enshrine in our libraries to build a cohesive environment going forward. Community.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just I really love the enthusiasm you're bringing to making the library a modern place that's accessible. Because, in my view, it really supports a community, whether it's access to information, if it's a place to go, whatever. So that's great. Is there anyone around the country, or maybe it's Australasia, that's on this continuum and a bit further ahead of where we are in terms of to get a sort of a visual sort of interpretation of where we're heading to?
Absolutely, through Mr. Chair. There are a number of libraries that have integrated cafes, a number of libraries that actively encourage noise and creation and messy and wet spaces, as well as libraries that have got defined areas for research and quiet reading and retreat. So yeah, there are examples around, and there are different flavours of library too. So in a wider network of libraries, you might have one that specialises in a real children's field, or a particular language set, or a technical aspect, say, such as farming or something like that. So there are different flavours of library, and we're probably delivering a very solid service here, but we've certainly identified that it's time to move quite quickly to catch up to some of those directions.
Just a supplementary, so with Christchurch Library, I hear a lot of good stories about that library and the effect it has on the people that visit it. So is that an example of what might be something we've been looking to head towards?
Absolutely. Te Rama has a combination of being a very fit for purpose in a traditional sense, but embracing that community development things. We also see some smaller libraries in the outskirts of the Canterbury region that are very much community focused, and they're leaving that sort of the heavy lifting of the research and stuff to that central library. If we look forward in the environment that we are in this city, I can imagine that the central library will have a dual role between those two aspects. Not forgetting Bluff, of course, that will probably evolve much more into a community-focused and responsive site for delivering programs.
Leslie, then Tom.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to say the library world has evolved dramatically since it first became my profession in 1977. And I can only commend our library staff for moving with the times. I just wanted to remind everybody that in fact Invercargill Public Library was a pioneer in the early days of programming in libraries in New Zealand. Elizabeth Miller, as children's librarian, led a vast change in the approach to children's librarianship in New Zealand, which every other library then caught up with successively. We've got the chance not only to catch up with some of the others who have taken slightly faster steps than us, and I'll comment on some of the Auckland branch libraries, which are also doing pretty exciting things, as well as the Christchurch ones, and just say Invercargill's got the chance to be a leader again in this whole focus on evolution of what libraries are, what they mean to people, and what they can actually deliver as key community focuses. So I'm really pleased to see the strategy. I know it's been a long time evolving it, but I think the work that's gone into it is great. And as my first profession, I've watched with great interest as a lot of those early community initiatives that many of us took on as bright new graduates have actually evolved to the point where every library is following down this path and every council is supporting that. Thanks, Richard.
Thanks, Leslie. Tom?
Richard, I fully support the strategy, but I hope there will still be quiet spaces where people can go and read books. But the question I'd have, you mentioned the photo montage that you're going to use in the cover. Are people going to give their permission before the photographs are used? Privacy is a big question for people these days.
Through you, Mr. Chair. The public program, and this is a bit indicative of our direction in terms of the library being a living room and a social connector. Our intention is to run a campaign where people can come and have a portrait taken, and we will have some props related to libraries. We will capture our communities. We will encourage them to wear the clothes that are important to them, or the mementos that are important, to really reflect who we are. As part of that, that will be free, and there will be a consent and release of information. As part of a focus towards a balanced commercial and philanthropic kind of approach, we will be offering paid, very cheap portraits for families. So a lot of families cannot afford to capture their kids with their grandparents now. So we're, on those 2 days that we run that program for us, we will also be running a very cheap charge project for people to be able to have their photos taken as a family, and of course full release for those private portraits as well.
Thank you. Evelyn?
Oh, kia ora. Through you, Mr. Chair, to Richard. Just a couple of comments. I was involved in this, so I've got to say that. I found that a little bit disconcerting that the use of macrons has changed the font. So I think they need to look at the font that they're using to make it. It's just a little bit discordant when you're trying to read it. I'm not quite sure what happened, but the other thing I want to comment on is I think this is excellent, and like Leslie, my first paid employment was working for Liz Miller in the Children's Library, so I have quite vivid memories of the changes that she started to make at that time. But I also see that in the community feedback that we've got coming up later, there were quite a lot of comments about the library as it is now, and as well as this wonderful initiative, addressing some of those things. There's a part of me feels that they don't go and ask somebody for help to find things, but there's also a real concern for me if people cannot easily identify where key sources like the Māori section, or there was a comment I think about research type materials being over 2 different floors, that sort of thing. We need to get those basic things right as well. So, but I'm really excited. It's lovely to see that we're taking these sorts of initiatives and making it uniquely ours, because it won't be like anybody else's, but also not to forget that we need to take the public along with us, and in some cases the changes that we've already made they're not really comfortable with. How do we address that?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think that is the core sort of focus around co-design. We want to make sure that what we do is authentic, and that goes through to wayfinding as well. When you walk into any big, whether it be a shop or a hotel or an airport or any big institution, you shouldn't have to rely on signs to tell you where to go. And some of the best airports in the world use colours to draw people through, so there is a natural kind of, they don't realise they're making a conscious decision, but they can find what they want. And libraries are no different in terms of the iconography, the pictures that are used in different parts. There should be a feeling where it feels natural for a teenager to gravitate towards, a child to gravitate towards, or a researcher, as well as that good wayfinding signage.
Mayor Clark?
Oh, just one thing on page 2. It makes reference to their key outcomes, and it talks a couple of times there about community partners. That's not a term that I've heard before in council. And if you go back to page 1, which is the background page, it talks about stakeholders. users and non-users, councillors, EV staff and community organisations. So I just wondered why, you know, I mean, I'm not sure to somebody else looking in whether they'd understand, you know, what is the obligation to what's been referred to as community partners, which seems to be a little bit different to stakeholders.
Correct. Through you, Mr. Chair. The term community partners means those we are going to partner with to deliver our program. So apologies if that's not clear. So in other words, we have people we need to respond to and report back to, but there'll be other groups that we want to actually partner with because they're better positioned to deliver an authentic program. Now that might be, and I'm just making these out of the top of my head, for instance, Literacy Aotearoa. Is there a partnership we could explore with them for some delivery, or a partnership with a local community group that has a particular skill set, rather than our staff having to learn that skill set and then pass it on? There might be a more authentic and efficient way to deliver that by developing genuine partnerships in delivery and design of programs with the community. So that's what that's talking about. The stakeholders and the interest groups, that is quite different. That is where we have an obligation to connect with our community. It's not so much on the delivery, it's about the ethos and the strategy itself.
Why I ask that? Because in the second bullet point it talks about collections, programs and services are regularly reviewed in collaboration with the community partners. So if they're a different group to the ones that are over here that you call stakeholders, does that mean that you might say, for example, consult with the Aotearoa group that you referred to, or some specialist in the community, but you may not necessarily consult with iwi or other community organisations? I guess that's where the confusion for me sits just a little bit. Because consulting with people is okay, but then when you start talking about regularly reviewing collections, which is what we hold, and the programs that we run and the services that we provide, I would have thought that that's predominantly coming back to council and coming back to governance and council, I guess, and to iwi and places like that.
Through Mr. Chair, I think that's a valid point in terms of it's clear. I was going to say clearly not clear, but I think the stakeholders are around strategy and direction, and the community partners are around delivery and much more an operational level. Okay. So a stakeholder might, and those higher partners might set the direction, but how we deliver that, we might actually go to one or two or several community partners, if that provides clarity.
Leslie, then Alex.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I was just going to give an example of one community partner where it might be helpful. At the moment, the Citizens Advice Bureau does a regular JP clinic in the public library, and that is a very popular and very well attended clinic. There may be times when it was necessary to talk with that community partner about the hours that clinic runs, the days it runs, whether it could be provided at some different times because the community were asking for that as part of the availability of JPs, etc. And I know that there are other community partnerships in much that way. That's just one I'm quite familiar with, where I can imagine that a discussion with the community partner on that particular service would be the way to check the service is operating, how it could be operated better, differently, how it could respond better to what the community is indicating they want, than necessarily a wider consultation with all stakeholders. So that's just one example of the community partnership.
Thank you. Alex?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hello. Fortunately, I guess I've grown up in an era, and I suppose other people in this room will have too, where the first port of call to find and access and research information was first and foremost the library, and now that's obviously gone through such a rapid evolution where the first and foremost source of information is now in your pocket. So I guess my questioning is around the fact that this is a 5-year strategy, and I really commend it for being evolutionary and definitely moving the service forward, which is quite clearly what the city needs. And like you mentioned before, the living room of the city, and that's something that when we went through the redevelopment process we were really cognizant of, is that it needed to be fit for purpose for the living room of the city and the evolution. But I guess my questioning is around the fact that, like, if I look at my daughter's age group now, she's just about to turn 10 in January, the only way that she's ever really accessed information is now looking to the internet, and they will grow to look to the internet for all sources of information, rather than first and foremost source of truth being books. So I guess questioning is around, what are we doing to prepare for the future, in the sense that that will be the default rather than books being the default. And we still read for on the internet or on digital devices. We still do pick up books, but I guess that's sort of grandfathering out as the populace ages. So what are we doing now, I guess, to look to the future in 50 years time or 30 years time, where they are sitting around this table and the first source of truth is the digital space?
Through you, Mr. Chair. I think we've got a balanced strategy here, but if you asked anyone in the library what are the two things that we're really focused on, one would be the digital and innovation field, and the other would be the community responsiveness and social aspect of the library. So those are first and foremost in everything that we're doing going forward. We're aware that like the 3D printer, people love, even I love watching the 3D printer for 5 minutes and then realizing it's going to take 8 hours to watch anything. But for the first 5 minutes, I'm really intrigued by it. And we've got people that we've still got large print, and probably large print will stay, even though devices can zoom in. There's still a transition period where people like to go between the two, and that's fine. But we will evolve much more into the digital space. Some great examples. I went into the Hamilton Library a couple of months back, and in the front section they've got all of their computer access there. They had a teenager with a VR headset playing something, looking like a crazy person, sort of flailing around. They had 3D printers, they had scans, they had all of that really interactive stuff right up the front. So it was an inviting place for youth to come into, and then they could leap into the other aspects of the library. So we're very cognizant of that. I think to your question about what we'll see in the next little while, we'll probably see a change in how the library looks and what prominence is given to some activity. We are aware that we're doing some activities that are hidden out the back. So we had our Minecraft escape room, for example, but it's right at the back where you can't see that it's happening. We want to give more prominence to those programs. So I think the first thing you'll see is more digital activity and more visible prominence given to that. But we need to work at the pace of the community and their needs and desires.
Thanks, Richard. It's interesting how things change, because a book will never go flat in its battery. But at the same time, an e-reader, you can change your backlighting to black with white text and read in bed without disturbing your partner. Trish.
I just see many of the programs that you're doing are igniters. I had a granddaughter who went to a coding session that you had over a period of time, and what that's generated is a lot more reading and getting into how coding works and what she can do. So I think there's a real place for that, igniting the interest in that critical thinking that they can't get just by skimming through internet material. So I think the direction you're heading is excellent.
Pania.
Just want to share my nephew Jay Coote. He actually worked in the library and brought a lot of fun and interesting activities. But I just want to highlight great strategy. But you did mention around the social cohesiveness and collectiveness, especially for those during this time of the year where they can't warm their homes, and I want to say that you acknowledge that those people do come into your library.
Oh yeah.
But they come in there for social interaction, but also for warmth.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Happy if they just come in and use the nicest public toilets in town, and they've got a safe space where they can just rest, and that's fine, because that might scale down an altercation somewhere else. They might learn to observe other cultures and other people around them, and a place of quiet rest is actually as valuable as anything else.
Yeah, so being connected. So when we talked about partners, it would be really good if there was sort of partnering with some of our wellbeing places that could be there as supports.
Thank you, councillors. I think Leslie acknowledged Liz Miller's exemplary work at the library many years ago, and it, in my mind, has always been a strength of our facility that the staff have in such an exemplary way welcomed young citizens and engaged with them in a super respectful way, so that they feel that it's a nice place to be, and that they might continue to go there, or they find other things, boys, girls, whatever, but they'll come back at some point. And if that stays at the core of what we're doing, as well as being that community hub, that's fabulous. Councillors, we've got 3 recommendations. Is somebody prepared to move them?
Do that.
Leslie and Evelyn, any further discussion or questions? If not, I'll put the motion. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you for the discussion on that. Thanks, Richard.
Thank you.
That brings us through to the activities report. Steve, do you want to oversee that? Or are there simply any questions that anybody has in what's contained in there?
No.
Rangi and then Barry.
Thanks, Chair. Look, it's just regarding the stats at the start. It's got calls and emails and figures for all of that. I just wonder where, after the stats for after our calls, are they in there, or are they separate? The ones after hours, weekend, at night, where are they recorded in those stats we've got?
The after hours calls are not recorded in these stats because they don't go through the main call centre system.
Oh, it's a shame. The reason I just want to touch on that, because I think the after hour call service we have is absolutely amazing, and provide such a wide, diverse skill set to answer questions right across the board. I mean, come Anzac Day, the website on council said, put your bins out, and it was a very windy day, and I'm saying, hey, look, this doesn't seem right. Rang the after hours centre. No, there is no collection today, sorry. There we go, they knew straight away. They knew, whoever does the council website had no idea, but so they are good, and they've been able all through, before I was on council, be able to solve many a problem. They don't just say, oh, we're going to have to pass that on. They actually do deliver. So I hope it's a service that we actually sort of foster and give them as much resource as we can.
Same applies during the day, actually. The same diagnosis goes on with daytime calls.
Oh, I guess I don't, I mean, you're getting a guy where are they, the water?
Yes, we're quite unique in that we have local after hours call centre.
Yeah.
So the water tower provide that service for us, and with their local knowledge and they do a fantastic job.
The reason I'm not mentioning during the day is that I'll just ring Jonathan or Russell. Sorry, it's
use the DDI.
Yeah. So no, just very well done.
And just to clarify, the water tower is in the building.
Yeah, very well done.
Yeah, you've got on the compliance thing, litter. Do people get hit up for, like, it's gone from 3 to 13? Do they get pulled over the coals for that, or what happens there?
Jonathan?
So through you, Chair, yes, we do have the ability to issue an infringement if it's significant enough.
Does that happen?
Yes, it does from time to time. We try to work with people to try and clear up the issue. We often, with the windy weather, we can have a few issues like that. We try and work with them in the first instance, but if they won't comply, then we'll infringe them.
Oh, yeah.
In some of those litter notices as well, Barry, you've got fly tippers who are people who just go and dump rubbish wherever, and if there's material in there that identifies whose rubbish it is, they get a love note.
Yeah, and there's just one other thing. I got told the other day, is this government going to take over the consenting of properties? And
You, Chair, we travel in hope, but no, I'm not aware of any plans to do so. They tried in 2012, I believe.
Yeah, I'll just class it as a vicious rumour then. Thank you.
Although, once upon a time there used to be local variances, and there aren't anymore. So you've got to go, why not have it done to a nationwide standard? It remains to be thrashed out. Grant?
Yeah, just with respect to the tracks and trails data, would it be good to see the year-on-year information because, you know, I think to me that's a really good sense of how our community and some of our really great assets are being used, and it equally tells me a story around wellness. So if people are out and active, our community generally, I think, is more healthy. But if we're seeing a drop off in that, and so it'd be good to sort of see what's happening. It possibly helps maintenance programs as well, but I just think it's a really good tenet of a wellness in our community.
Yeah, we can bring that report back.
Yeah, just in the next pack will be fine. Doesn't have to come back specially. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions or points councillors wish to raise? Somebody like to? Oh, sorry.
Oh no, just a question about, and it was just a little bit in here about the Ticketek network.
Oh, yeah.
Is this actually changing how our organisation is going to have to operate in the future, and what is it going to be a cost or no?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Look, the reference there is to ILT Stadium's change in ticketing provider, and just in how we manage our contract, because we are still with Ticketek, and we do have a contract that extends sometime into the future. So Richard and the team are looking at what this means for us, but it is fully, if we do need more resource to sell tickets, it's a fully cost recoverable service because of the take we get on each ticket sold.
That is the booking fee.
No, thank you for that, but I just saw that there and I wasn't quite clear what in the long term it would mean for us.
Thank you. Somebody like to move we receive the report, please? Grant and Barry. I'll put that all in favour.
Aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. With there being nothing else that I'm aware of in the open part of the meeting, I'll move that we go into public excluded to discuss the... Sorry? I haven't even finished moving yet. There you go.
I'll move, Chair. But I'll second
The
it.
confirmation for the minutes of the public excluded session from April 18, and also the South Museum and Art Gallery Trust Board appointments process in there as well. Moved Tom, seconded Peter. Thanks to those who've joined us on the live stream. The stream will be finishing. And